Hello, my name is Shubh Malde, and I'm the managing editor of the Chicago Thinker. This conversation comes to you as protests on the Israel-Hamas war sweep through universities and colleges across the country. Encampments have been the prevailing strategy of pro-Palestinian demonstrators, and at the University of Chicago, the encampment lasted just over a week before being dismantled by the university's police department. The reactions of administrators and law enforcement nationwide have come under the spotlight, rekindling an intense debate on free expression. At the forefront of that debate is Ilya Shapiro, a senior fellow and director of constitutional studies at the Manhattan Institute. Born in Soviet Moscow before immigrating to Canada, Ilya holds a bachelor's degree from the Princeton University, a master's in international relations from the London School of Economics, and a JD from the University of Chicago Law School. Ilya previously served as executive director and senior lecturer at the Georgetown Center for the Constitution and was a vice president of the Cato Institute. Among other works, he is the author of Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations and the Politics of America's Highest Court, and the forthcoming book, Lawless, The Miseducation of America's Elites. He has testified many times before Congress and state legislatures, has filed more than 500 friend of the court briefs in the Supreme Court, and regularly lectures on behalf of the Federalist Society. Ilya and I discuss free speech, the recent protests, and the state of higher education in America. Ilya, welcome.
Yeah, good to be with you. Chicago Thinker does fantastic work.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I have to start by asking you, what on earth is going on at our universities?
Well, I've avoided them since all the nastiness has started. It seems now that we're learning about funding mechanisms and corporate structures, especially through the National Students for Justice in Palestine organization, to disrupt educational institutions, to make leadership in those organizations look weak and bad, and kind of distort the messaging about the Israel-Hamas war to make it look like Israel are the bad guys. It's kind of the culmination of a lot of negative trends that we've been seeing in higher education lately. The illiberal left, the DEI-ification of everything, these viewing everything through lenses of oppressor and oppressed classes, the postmodern ideologies of intersectional hierarchies and all that. So you have these bizarre phenomenon of queers for Palestine, which is incongruous. And it seems like there's this very well organized network across so many, hundreds of campuses. And since the crisis in higher ed is already in national news, this has just added to it.
To me and to many others, there was almost a moment of disillusionment in the immediate wake of October the 7th, when many people came face to face with the realities of woke ideologies in our universities. Was that a surprise to you when the reaction of university students came so viscerally, almost immediately after Hamas's attack on Israel?
It is odd that the heart of anti-Semitism in America is in its most educated, supposedly progressive places. That's unusual. It's also unusual that even though anti-Semitism is more prevalent in Europe than it is in America, the student demos have all been in America, and that's because I think the illiberal left, of both the Hamas supporters and fellow travelers, and kind of just naive, go along to get along student activists. Um, they recognize, those who are organizing them, that American popular opinion is important, and it's important to disrupt the relationship between America and Israel. And so, those of us who have been criticizing and complaining and highlighting the rot at the heart of academia in America, we're not surprised, but certainly 10/7, and then the disastrous testimony of the university presidents at the House hearing in December elevated all of these issues to the national public discourse.
And across campuses, and I'll take U Chicago as is my example. We've seen signs put up by protesters that read phrases such as "globalize the Intifada," "honor the martyrs," and chants of "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," all of which you'll be aware of. Taken in isolation, these phrases are widely protected by universities, but we've just seen the House pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Bill, which a bill which codifies a federal definition of anti-Semitism. Is this a welcome development to you, or do you see it as a fresh threat to free speech?
Well, the House bill doesn't change any existing laws. All it does is define anti-Semitism with more precision. And so we have Title VI that already for a long time has prohibited negative actions in the educational arena with respect to institutions that receive federal funding based on race and sex and ethnicity and ancestry as well. But we've never had a good definition of what anti-Semitism is, and this legislation adopts the widely accepted definition of the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, I think it's called, which is accepted across the ideological spectrum. It's the gold standard. Basically, anyone who doesn't wish Jews ill will finds it, the way to do it. So this is not all of a sudden criminalizing or regulating speech that otherwise was not regulated. It doesn't give the Department of Education any more powers than it didn't previously have. It just defines anti-Semitism and makes clear what exactly we're talking about. So I think it's a positive development. I'm second to no one in terms of free speech advocacy or opposition to DEI structures, and I've written and sponsored, offered model legislation on all these fronts. But the criticism that this is some sort of instantiating DEI or chilling speech is simply false, just based on the text of the rather simple bill.
Right, and we've also seen protesters frequently, especially in the wake of incumbents being shut down, frequently cite the First Amendment as protecting their rights to both set up those incumbents and engage in the process. Does this not protect their rights?
Well, there's a difference between speech and action, and there's a difference between protected and unprotected speech, and then there are time, place, and manner regulations. Those are kind of three buckets to understand all of this in. You don't get speech protections, whether from the First Amendment directly or from the broad speech and expression protective policies that most universities have, simply by saying that you're doing something out of political belief or free expression. If you beat somebody up, if you vandalize, you don't get a defense by saying, "Oh, but I'm doing it out of a political or expressive motivation." Similarly, if you issue death threats or incite violence, there's clear jurisprudence about what that means, but that's not protected speech. And then the third bucket is in the educational context, you can't block access to buildings, you can't disrupt classes or student organization meetings or other programs of the educational institution. In the non-campus context, even though we care about political speech and the First Amendment clearly protects that, I can't go to your neighborhood in the middle of the night and with a bullhorn tell you exactly what I think about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's disturbing the peace. Similarly, I can't block streets. We've seen that. And highways, there are neutral rules, not speech regulating, that say you can't do those sorts of things and you don't get protections for doing them out of an expressive motivation. So similarly here on campus, campuses have rules against disruption. They have rules against public camping, blocking access on pathways, let alone rules against harassment and intimidation and things like this. So you see in places that enforce those clear and longstanding rules, like the University of Florida, for example, Vanderbilt University that cleared out protesters out of the president's office very quickly. Took Chicago, strangely, a while. The president there was kind of dilly-dallying, but ultimately cleared out the encampment. But anyway, you see the places that enforce the rules, and these things operate differently than something like Columbia, where it just spirals out of control.
And last week at U Chicago and across campuses nationwide, there were waves of counter-protests, both pro-American and pro-Israeli. And there's been at least speaking to my friends privately, a slow revelation of a silent majority. Do you think these protests can serve as a turning point in the national conversation?
I hope so. I mean, I think most people who are not political, who are not living online or on Twitter or on social media or what have you, they're just normal people concerned about their lives and their kids and their jobs. As they see this stuff, they're turned off by it. What are these privileged elites harping about? And then they want they're upset that the dining services doesn't give them boxed lunches in their encampments and things like this. It's bizarre. And the kids are complaining when they're getting arrested or cleared out. The nature of civil disobedience is to make the authorities take action against you, arrest you, and then to highlight the injustice of the law that you're violating. This isn't quite that. These are not, erstwhile Gandhis or Martin Luther Kings and things like that. So I think the tide is turning, and as we see kind of the celebration of the fraternity boys and others who are rescuing the flag and counter protesting indeed in a nonviolent manner, saying that this is not, what you're doing is nonsense. Protest on your own time in your own place. Don't disrupt my life. I think that is the general sentiment. And I just saw some polling, even among students, forget the American population as a whole, but even among students, that kind of silent majority really is turning against these weirdos.
I know we want to end on a positive note. I'll quote a recent statement from MIT President Sally Kornbluth. We can build an inclusive environment in many ways, but compelled statements impinge on freedom of expression, and they don't work. So MIT will no longer be requiring diversity statements for hiring. I think that they become the first elite university to do so. Is that welcome news to you?
Absolutely. Chris Rufo and I proposed about a year and a half model legislation for public universities, that can be regulated by state legislatures to abolish their DEI structures, get rid of these diversity statements or any other ideological litmus tests, get rid of identity-based preferences in hiring and admissions, goes beyond what even the Supreme Court decided, and end diversity trainings that are not effective, at best are not effective. And so we're seeing movement in that direction. I don't know if MIT is the first elite institution to declare that. It might be the first one that had diversity statements to then reverse itself on that. But Sally Kornbluth, there's a lot of she's the lone president standing from that December hearing. And she's taken a lot of missteps, for example, in not punishing disruptors because a lot of them are foreigners and would have their student visas pulled and would have to leave the country. So in effect, foreign disruptors and violators of the rules have more rights at MIT than American students do, which is bizarre. But anyway, that's a good step at MIT, both in clearing out their encampment and getting rid of diversity statements. But in general, again, you see, Ben Sasse, who's now the former senator, who's now the president of the University of Florida, has shown how this is not rocket science. How to deal with these sorts of activities. We protect and promote the freedom of speech and expression to the utmost, but you have to recognize that there's literally a time and a place, and we don't have to come up with new theories or new policies to figure out how to deal with this moment.
And do you think decisions like this will pave the way for other universities and give them the confidence to take the same steps? Or do you think that the grip on administrations the ideological grip is already too tight for that to happen anytime soon?
University administrators, presidents, provosts, deans are generally not social justice warriors. They're not woke radicals. They're not the ones chanting from the river to the sea. Some of them do have a no enemies to the left sort of attitude, and so they placate the protesters, even if they don't, see them as going a little too far, too youthfully exuberant or what have you. But the exogenous shocks, as economists would call them, or external pressures that we've seen, whether from employers or from media attention or from state and federal officials investigating potential violations of the law, I think all of these things are bringing institutions kicking and screaming to a sort of normality. There's still a lot of problems with the status quo ante in terms of discrimination in hiring based on viewpoint, in terms of these DEI structures that indoctrinate illiberal views, starting from freshman orientation and all the rest of it. But in terms of dealing with the immediate threat from these terrorist supporters, I think you won't see this again come the fall.
Well, Ilya, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Uh, Thank you, and big fan of the Chicago Thinker. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it.